Welcome to We Are Not Alive. I'm Gus Zagarella.
And I'm Henry Galley, and welcome to our Halloween special of Two Professional Writers, our newly revamped show where we talk about writing advice from all kinds of different sources. And I want to get out of the way for anyone who is looking at the title and worrying. We are not going to roast the Magnus Archives. We love the Magnus Archives, but it is very relevant to what we're discussing today for a number of interesting reasons. So, what are we discussing today, Gus?
Well, we are going to be discussing writing rules, specifically the writing rules of the r/NoSleep subreddit, which, like many writing rules, some of our own included, can be prescriptive, limiting, but also occasionally a source of wisdom.
Yeah.
So we'll find out which is which. Well, maybe, talking about one of our favorite successful horror audio dramas, which is the Magnus Archive.
Yes, exactly. So, there's some really interesting history to get into before we discuss this today, because with a lot of the things we've kind of talked about on this show before, there've been stuff that's been sent to us. There've been things that we've found across the internet, from Chuck Wendig to Jeff Bezos to Lily Orchard. Thanks for the shout out, by the way, June the King. Much appreciated. Hope we never appear in one of your videos again in any other context. So, but this is a bit different though. Because I actually have a really personal relationship with the r/NoSleep subreddit, because it is actually how I got started as a professional writer. So what does that mean? I used to post stories on there under a number of different names. The most sort of prolific of them was Double Door Bastard, and it was from posting horror stories on r/NoSleep back in sort of like 2015, 2016 that I first got discovered by the people behind the No Sleep podcast, and I got my first ever paid writing gig, which then ballooned into a sort of several year relationship where I wrote. I have to check my page on the No Sleep podcast wiki because I never remember. We'll link that in the comments. I wrote 43 different stories for them over the course of my tenure. And without them, I wouldn't have met many of the wonderful people we know today who contribute to this channel, like Addison Peacock, Nicole Goodnight, the voice of Direwolf, just as so many different wonderful people. And recently, as you may remember, Gus, I was feeling a little bit nostalgic, wanted to go to memory lane, and considered, what if, just for fun, like not even playing for pay anymore, I started posting on No Sleep again. And then I went back and I saw that they had instituted some new rules. And Jesus Christ, are they wackadoo?
Yeah, so this is not just a, hey, let's, have a lark looking at like another random list of writing tips from some person of prominence or some social media platform. This is personal for you because these are your old stomping grounds. Much like the boy king of Second Life, your kingdom has gone fallow. And like I'm coming with you and you're returning here and we're going to see just exactly what has become of the old No Sleep Reddit threads.
Yeah, no, because they produced some like really iconic stories back in the day, and some like very successful writers like CK Walker, who is actually kind of an acquaintance of mine, has gone on to write on a number of Mike Flanagan projects like The Haunting of Hill House and Fall of the House of Usher on Netflix. So it's produced some real greats, and the reason why I feel the need to talk about these ideas today is not only because if all of our plans have gone successfully, we're posting this on Halloween night, which makes it very appropriate to discuss spooky things.
Woo!
I think what upsets me the most about a lot of these very strange and restrictive new rules that they've posted is that I don't know if I would have ever became the person I was today if I came onto the subreddit when these rules are in effect. So, Are you first ready, Gus, to discuss the rules that concern the horror genre itself?
Yes, I'm very, very interested in exactly what is horror du jour on No Sleep right now.
Yeah, so here is the kind of overview. By the way, I know this is a very cliche YouTube thing to say. At the end of the day, the subreddit belongs to the mods, and they can run it however the hell they want. Don't go and like harass anyone or petition them to change or whatever. It's more just to discuss the rules on their own merits.
Yeah. This is about the principle of the thing, not the people behind it or this particular community. It's about the idea that like if this community wants to do it their way, then they have a full right to. But you shouldn't feel like if you're not a part of this community that this extends to you, that you have to necessarily write this way, unless any of this stuff resonates with you. In which case, you have that option. And now that we've gotten our classic YouTube disclaimer out of the way, let's get into the nitty gritty of some of these rules.
Absolutely. So we begin with the first big change on a post called Horror on No Sleep. R/NoSleep is a niche horror fiction posting subreddit. It's not a general fiction posting subreddit or even a general horror fiction posting subreddit. Stories posted to r/NoSleep are framed as scary personal experiences and treated as quote unquote true, whether or not they actually are. Because of this, not every type of horror or every style of story is allowed on NoSleep. All stories submitted to NoSleep must contain an event, a consequence, and a scared main character.
Okay, so immediately this just strikes me as creepypasta with more steps and none of the accompanying innovation that came from when people were just like, hey, creepypastas can be more than just I'm saying that this is real and it happened to me.
No, exactly. Because I think so many of the rules we're going to encounter today that I think are particularly bizarre are ones that involve this idea of like maintaining immersion or being something that could be real, which I think is a really funny rule because of how strange and subjective it is. We've often railed on this and other videos on the channel against the concept we call the horror hard men, who are the kind of people who will like watch a horror movie and either be like, well, ghosts aren't real, so this doesn't scare me, or like, well, if I was there, I'd have my fucking AR-15 and pump 16 rounds into this thing's head. And it goes to show that it's really funny and really arbitrary where they choose to draw the line on like what makes for a immersively real horror experience and what is considered like beyond the pale.
No doubt, even doing this as like scary personal experiences with like the event and all, that stuff that just like, makes it very structural. I don't know how that gets you more immersed in the end because you start to recognize the formula and then you're back to square one where you're going in with the expectations of a certain kind of story. You know what I mean? Like the fictional elements of it are not made more real and more like raw and frightening for following the rule necessarily.
No, it's true, and it kind of what's honestly been really wonderful about internet horror from the outset, from your classic kind of like weird David Firth, like Flash cartoons, some of your OG like creepypasta, like No End House and Candle Cove, and all of the ones that Channel Zero adapted, to like sort of like newer weird freaky things today, like analog horror and like ARG websites like Welcome Home, is it's always felt kind of like it's horror without the same guardrails that kind of box in a lot of the horror media that you see in more like formulaic mainstream releases. Not to say there aren't some great horror movies out there, but that on the internet, there's this odd feeling that anything could happen, that you're encountering something that's legitimately sort of strange and dangerous. And you lose that when you overstructure.
Yeah, and I think my takeaway too is that like I can kind of see like what they're going for and the kind of feelings they might be trying to evoke by keeping it in this very particular like early creepypasta space of like trying to fool people in an ARG way and trying to make people feel that like primal fear of like this could happen to them. I just think that it's at odds with the presentation and the fact that people are going to see this rule before they try and write their like creepy ARG so real you can feel it, you might expect it to happen to you story.
Exactly. So let's get into their kind of subdivisions of this. Like, what is a scary personal experience? What is an event? What is a character feeling fear? It starts at a point to feel like those weird auto-generated, like, chapter titles that appeared on the Cat in the Hat video that are like, the dimension, the joke.
His power.
His power.
It just wouldn't be Reddit without arbitrary distinctions made for the purpose of making somebody feel like they're an expert on something.
Yeah, created by mods that have gone mad with power in their little hermit kingdom.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so
in their dimensions.
First, what is a scary personal experience? On NoSleep, a scary personal experience is a horror-themed event and directly related and significant consequence plus scared main character. The event and consequence must be related. There must only be one point of view character who is directly affected and scared by the experience. Readers should be afraid for the main/posting character, not afraid of them. There can be more characters in the story, but only one main/point of view character. NoSleep doesn't allow omniscient characters/narrators, nor can you make the readers the main character of your story. See Perspectives POVs for more, and I'm sure we will. So, a lot has happened there. I'm not going to ask you to react to any of that, Gus, because they break it down a little bit further. Are you ready to learn what an event is?
I'm so ready to learn what an event is. And what it cannot be, also, crucially.
So, horror. What is an event? On NoSleep, an event is when the main/posting character experiences something scary, such as encountering a ghost at work or finding a corpse in the trunk of their newly purchased car. We've all been there. It's such a bugger. You wonder why the price is so low, and then you're like, oh, god damn it, I'm gonna have to have the whole car fumigated. This is a nightmare. The hidden costs are ridiculous. Who'll insure this thing now?
It's also just so funny of, like, including, but presumably not limited to, seeing a ghost, or a zombie in your trunk, or running into my ex-wife.
It's so hard to not picture, like, Bubble Bass from SpongeBob SquarePants typing all of this stuff out.
Your story must include a triple bossy deluxe and make it swim.
We serve horror stories here, sir. Anyway, so they go into more detail on what exactly an event is. The event must be a major plot point in the story. This applies to every post on r/NoSleep, including every part of a series. If any part of your story/series lacks an event, it will be removed. I literally don't know how you could possibly write a story without an event. Like, I'd almost be kind of impressed by that.
No, it's true, because I feel like if it's written down into a story, there will be something that at the very least the audience will interpret as an event, or the implication that an event has occurred. I don't think you can write that many words and people come away with, like, okay, nothing has happened. Unless it's literally just all descriptions of a room, you know?
I'm also obsessed with the event must be a major plot point in the story. For starters, I feel like the Mitchell and Webb sketch, the do not talk about the event every time I say this, but the idea of it not being a major plot point, like you tell this whole like Shaggy Dog story about like going to like the supermarket to buy a loaf of bread and your card gets declined. You don't have, and then like the last line is like, and then I was killed by a ghost, and it ends there.
Go to the store, pick up the milk and bread, go home, talk to my wife. My wife is being mean to me. I go back to the store, I ask out the receptionist. She doesn't like it, so I go for a drive. I find a ghost on the road. The ghost is kind of strange, so I go home. I talk to my wife, we work it out. The end.
the heartwarming indie movie about the ghost of a marriage counselor.
Yeah, see, that had a lot of events in it, I presume. Some of them scarier than others.
That's so funny. By the way, just in case you've heard all that and you still feel really stumped about what your story should about, we get 3 things under a heading that says more examples of an event include. Are you ready?
Oh, please, please. I thought it was only going to be ghosts or things in the trunk, but now I know. Now I know there are other options out here in the wild world of NoSleep horror. I don't know why I'm coming out the gate and being so bad faith. I just want to hear what these examples are.
I will say before we do the events, sympathy for the devil here. I would not for a second pretend that it would be easy to moderate a subreddit where people can post like art or stories, especially in this horrible like post Chat GPT era we find ourselves in, where like they're probably inundated with absolute like machine slop made by people who are just trying to like karma farm. So I get that it must be really frustrating, but it's a real kind of like Patriot Act, like freedom versus security thing going on here.
I automatically sort of like rattle against anything that's like this prescriptive, but at the same time, I do want to hear what events are given as just kind of the springboard and building block.
Okay, so there is my Tinder/Bumble. I love that they gave options for that. My Tinder/Bumble date took me to somewhere secluded and romantic to tell me they're a serial killer and attack me. Incredible. Event number 2 is, on my way home from work, I was jumped by a werewolf and mauled horribly. And the last one is, last week at the coffee shop, the barista called out my name and someone else who looked exactly like me reached for my coffee at the same time I did. Don't you hate it when your alternate steals your fucking mocha at the line at Starbucks?
Yeah, exactly. Like, order your own doppelganger. I was up there. Where were you?
Imagine a shapeshifter who only uses their power to steal coffee.
That would be quite the event, Henry Kelly.
That'd be but no, we couldn't do that because, as we will later find out, you can't be scared of the person telling the story, just scared for them. Alright, we'll move on, but people in the comments, I encourage you, give us some examples of events that you think would make fun horror stories. I bet you can't do one scarier than the coffee thing. Give us some events. Can't wait to hear what you come up with. And for every event, there must of course be a consequence, which brings us to what is a consequence? Are you ready?
I'm sure, yeah. Give me the consequences.
What are full life consequences for the people of NoSleep? Alright, on r/NoSleep, a consequence is an experience which follows the event as a direct result, such as the ghost you encountered at work followed you home and is constantly hurting you, or the corpse you discovered in your car's trunk turns out to be a murder victim and yours was the only DNA found on it, so now you're on the run from the police, thinking, oh god, I knew I shouldn't have had sex with it.
This is just what are bros
Yeah,
for again.
Oh god, the less we say about that, the better. And then it goes, I love, by the way, just like I get it. We've often said that the new mantra for this show has become, we don't want better writers, we want more writers, because at the end of the day, it's best to just get people off the bench and into the game, and they'll learn as they go. But, like, god damn, you are fighting an uphill battle if someone needs to explain causality itself to you. I would hope that is intrinsic to the way we experience, like, time as human.
I think what this does is it almost abstracts the idea of causality into being event, singular, and then consequence, singular or plural, potentially?
We don't want complicated layered stories here. Give us a setup and a punchline, that's it.
But not even that. It's also just like haven't you ever heard of beginning, middle, and end? And it's like, no. Event consequence.
Beginning, end. Again, like you said, that's so Reddit to be like,
beginning
middle, and end
no
is
middle.
Inefficient. We have revised it to beginning, end. Nice and simple.
It's so funny because I'm just thinking of like, yeah, every story is better with a beginning and end in no middle. Like, and I'm just thinking like, one day Walter White decided to sell drugs. Immediately he dies.
Rose got on the Titanic. It sank.
Oh my god.
That's so funny. Just in case we hadn't quite gotten it through our thick skull, they have 3 examples of consequences for us.
Oh good. Oh good. I need it to be extended beyond the ghost you saw or the thing in your trunk.
What I love is the idea of, in the comments over the course of this, helping people build their own little mini no-sleep story by like, okay, paint by numbers. First, comment the event. Now add the consequence to your event. And we'll slowly build it out. Anyway, so more examples of a consequence include 1. My date tried to kill me after telling me they're a serial killer. We were in the middle of nowhere with no one around to help me. I barely survived fighting off my quote-unquote date and made it to the nearest road, where a passing motorist found me and offered to call 911. Then I noticed the guy in the back seat of the car was the serial killer and had to run again. But, alright, I need to pause for a second there. Like, I know that they're kind of doing the, like, end of House of a Thousand Corpses thing there, but there is something really funny about, like, did he, like, Uber you here to the side of the lake? And it's, like, found the car on the road, selected Uber pool. Oh no, it's him again!
Yeah, it's just one of those things where it's just like, okay, like, how did you get here? If you could have caught me, maybe.
That's so funny. Next we have, a cloud covered the full moon, allowing me to escape from the werewolf. When I got home, I noticed a bite mark on my shoulder and that patch of skin began to itch. I've got to say, it seriously nerfs the werewolf if they temporarily become human again if a cloud covers the moon.
Yeah, that's kind of wild. I'm also just thinking back to like the original wording. It's like, a werewolf mauled me horribly, as in it was really horrible at mauling me. It didn't do a very good job, and I didn't even get that hurt. But I might also be infected with werewolfism.
The idea of like a werewolf really badly attacking a guy and the guy being like, first night, huh? I remember my first transformation.
Yeah, it's just like, look, my gums are really sensitive right now. I want to eat you, but it hurts.
That's so fun. And just the idea of it ends up like consoling the werewolf. Like, no man, I was really scared. I think for a first time you actually did a really good job, man.
I'll tell you what, man, I'm gonna buy you a big old bloody steak, you know? Maybe instead of munching on a dude, you munch on a steak for a little bit. This will make you feel good. Make you feel nice.
Maybe this is the beginning of our hit new supernatural romance novel.
Yeah.
This brings us to the final consequence, by the way. My quote-unquote identical twin turned out to be my doppelganger. Okay, who started following me everywhere I went and has been trying to kill me ever since. I'm in hiding, but I don't know how long I'll be safe. Like, it's not your identical twin if they have the exact same first and last name as you. You know? Like,
I do kind of like how, like, these were meant to be, like, very basic examples, but they all got, like, lost in the weeds in a weird way. Like, I don't know how else to describe it, but, like, this explained consequences, but it also just kind of told 3 stories. And at that point, if people can already understand why the stories got here, they probably were equipped to, like, try this without someone hovering over their shoulder anyway.
can we fuse them? So it's, I was in Starbucks one day, they called my name for my order, and then my serial killer boyfriend reached out and grabbed the cup, and I was like, hey, what the fuck? And he turned into a werewolf.
I found myself on Tinder, but it was actually my werewolf self. But we went out for coffee and they were actually fine. But now I might be a werewolf too.
This has actually been a secret fantasy of mine.
This is my greatest fear or my most powerful fetish. I don't know which.
Porque no los dos.
But it's certainly an event.
It's certainly an event, and there will surely be consequences. What we have now is, this is when it starts to get real goof troop, in my opinion, which is horror making fear clear. So, it says, a character's fear should be very clear at least once during the scary experience. Not necessarily the whole story. since stories posted to r/NoSleep are supposed to be scary personal experiences, written as though someone actually went through those events. While your character can also be angry, confused, concerned, and amused, thank you, their fear must be clear, and ideally will be their predominant emotion regarding the scary personal experience. Describing how your character emotionally, mentally, and or physically reacts to scary events without being over the top or obnoxious about it. Even something as simple as "this is/was the scariest thing I've ever gone through" at the beginning of the post can help establish that your character is/was afraid. And then they have a list of examples: accelerated breathing and heart rate, clenching/muscle tension, chicken skin/goosebumps, sweating, hunching shoulders, backing/pulling/shrinking away, shaking/trembling, rocking, wide eyes, wrapping one's arms around oneself, stomach, quote, dropping/twisting, blood, quote, running cold, feeling chills, fight, flight, or freeze reactions. Holy shit.
And you better stick to the pre-approved list of ways of expressing the pre-approved dominant emotion of the event so that the consequences can have proper weight for the point of view character who we're not afraid of and are scared for. Because
it's so ridiculous.
Yeah, it's all clicking for me right now. Like, this is my fear becoming apparent, that, like, this is the level to which stories need to be, like, supervised here in order to, like, even be, like, seen again. Because, like, I can think off the top of my head of so many creepypastas that the character is, like, just confused or, like, mad, or, like, they like, are, like, thinking in retrospect about something that they didn't react to at the time.
Like Candle Cove.
That was, like, super bizarre. Yeah, and all of those stories, like, you know, work for what they're trying to go, because there is this, like, you know, broadness of what is allowed in them to express these ideas. I think at this point I'm fully like, you know, when you put it all this way, it seems like it's really hard to have any kind of creative freedom writing a story around here.
Yeah, and like there is a wonderful device that if you're watching this, you've probably heard about it in English class already, called dramatic irony, where you can produce a certain effect in the reader by having them realize or know something the character doesn't. The kind of classic, almost cliche example is the Hitchcock bomb under the table, where the tension comes from the fact that you know about it, you know that at some point it's gonna go off, but the characters are completely oblivious. It's the same as something Addison really loves and introduced me to, the kind of Japanese internet custom of the cryptic horror story, which will be things where the horror is not readily apparent, but you kind of put it together and realize in a fridge horror kind of way. Like, say, a famous one is about a character describing their routine before going to bed, and you realize that in the list of things they described closing their bedroom window twice. And the horror there comes from, oh, something has opened the bedroom window, gotten in, and the viewpoint character is completely oblivious to the danger they're in. And that's what's scary.
That's very true, and this applies to a lot of different kinds of horror stories. And to bring it back to the show that we mentioned at the beginning of this video, the Magnus Archives, there is a particular technique that is used in a lot of the, like, paranormal reports in that show that I think works to great effect. And it's this moment in a lot of them where a character will, like, articulate, if I had left it there, then it would have stopped there. There's a lot of times in these stories where you see the character taking agency to go farther than the initial, like, eerie, weird event that they encounter, and that's when they experience a like significantly more bizarre or threatening or terrifying supernatural event. And that kind of falls outside of this whole like the scary thing happens and we're just scared for the protagonist and then there are consequences and that's the whole story. Because I don't know about you, man, but like sometimes the most frightening thing about things that have happened to me in my life or things I thought were going to happen to me is the idea of the choices I did or didn't make that led me there.
No, precisely. And again, like you said, Gus, the very reason that I wanted to kind of thread a discussion of the Magnus Archives, the Rusty Quill audio drama written and created and starring Johnny Sims, which currently has a spin-off coming out called the Magnus Protocol. For those who don't know, in as least spoilery way as possible, the premise of the show is the Jonathan Sims, not to be confused with Johnny Sims, though he is played by Johnny Sims, is the archivist at the Magnus Institute, which is an organization that catalogs supernatural happenings. And for the most part, every episode is about him reading a statement where someone has come in to kind of share a bizarre paranormal happening that has happened to them. Again, very relevant to our discussion of NoSleep, because much like NoSleep, it is like a necessary component of what's happening that obviously whoever it was lived long enough to come and give the statement. There's never this fear of like, oh, is the character that is giving this gonna kind of die, and we'll get into more about that later. But the genius of it is the frame narrative, where a lot of the time, in my opinion, and you see this from the very first episode, Anglerfish, Jonathan will, at the end of an episode, give context on it. You know, like, he will read the statement, and then he'll say, like, well, okay, here was when this was given to us, we did a follow-up investigation, and we found this out. And oftentimes that will add, like, another element of fear to it, and if a sticky end befell the main character of the story, which can sometimes happen, you find out about that in the postscript, which is really clever.
Yeah, no, it's an incredibly inventive format and a testament to what audio drama can do for so few resources. Most of these voiceovers are just from Johnny Sims during, like, you know, the first season, but the range of stories that can be told in the Magnus Archives, it ranges wildly from stuff that is like, you know, a supernatural urban myth kind of thing to like a cosmic horror story to something that almost feels like a missive from the war. And all of these things, with the context that Jonathan gives them at the end of these reports, they blend together in this really interesting way because you end up getting a sense for a world that could contain unfathomable horror, but because of the inherent skepticism, because of the fact that these are reports, because there's a level of abstraction, your mind is left to wander, what do I believe? What do I think has really occurred here? And is even Jonathan's context on it the full context? Or is he misinformed about you know, these events on their own? It's a very layered show, and I know, like, you know, for audio drama fans, we're probably like re-explaining something
they are
very well
screaming
acquainted
out there because they know the hidden element we are delicately dancing around to avoid spoilers. But it's a point worth making in this context.
Right, and I do want to, like, you know, full disclosure, I still have a few seasons to listen to of the show. I haven't gotten through all of the lore, but I'm, like, seeing, like, the little seeds that they're planting of, like, anxieties and terrors of, like, where this is all going, and I'm really excited to check out the rest of this series. It's a fantastic piece of audio horror, and it's one of those things where, like, I fear that stories like it, the breadth of what they're able to accomplish, would not work in a prescriptive rule set similar to that which we've been going over at r/NoSleep currently.
Yes, and we are going to get right back into that, as well as further discussion of the Magnus Archives, but we have a quick little diversion to make. Something very special
Yes,
that we're
we
very
do!
excited
Yes,
to tell
we
you about.
do!
And this is hilariously not even that much of a non sequitur, because if you're listening to this and you like audio drama and you enjoy listening to Johnny Sims, then we have a treat for you. So, myself and Addison Peacock are the co-creators of the show that I'm about to tell you about. But Gus is an executive producer, along with other friend of the show, Zooey LaFou. Meg Malloy Tootin is the fabulous audio engineer of it. And Johnny Sims is actually one of the recurring cast members. It's called Killjam Triple X. It is a kind of satirical black comedy cyberpunk action series about a future where a kind of like violent all women, don't worry, it's very queer and trans inclusive, death game is like the most popular sport on TV. And our main character, Faustina Fetamine, as played by the wonderful Addison Peacock, has just been shafted by her evil bastard of a boss and is now having to go it on her own, and will do so with the help of a wonderfully chaotic and Machiavellian manager named Bellamy, played by Zooey. Rather than me doing a huge info dump, here's the trailer. Gus?
Let's play that thing.
It's Killjam Triple X. Choose your fighter. Faustina Fetamine. She's a femme and feral machete bisexual.
Ready to admit I'm hot as fuck? Or do I need to slice something off?
Bellamy Pink. He's a chaotic neutral cyborg twink.
If anyone's gonna sell my kidneys, it's gonna be me!
Mara Knocked. She's retired from the ring, but not from kicking ass.
You can dodge, block, or die.
Dr. Yuzna. He's a traumatized trauma surgeon.
And you're sure you don't want any anesthetic?
Anaconda. She's a lethal lesbian snake with expensive taste.
What's that? Did you say tighter?
Vic Cadmium. He's a charming rogue with a heart of gold.
I am, quite frankly, too pretty to die.
Molly Malarkey. She's just a silly, goofy, very safe clown.
Hiya, boys and girls. Who wants to see me chop up a bunch of people tonight?
Roger Tallarico. He's a solid gold piece of shit.
Orville, hold that camera straight or I'll fuck your wife again.
Lex the Talon. She's a beefy butch with a blade.
Nobody kills Faustina but me, okay?
Mr. Dirge. He's pure evil in a three-piece suit.
Sparse turnout. I'll need to kill someone after this.
You have chosen your fighter. Ready? Let the battle begin!
Killjam Triple X. It's like a fighting game for your ears!
Subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts and go to killjamxxx.com.
See you soon, cuties!
There we go. That is Killjam Triple X. That is Killjam XXX. Want to know more? Oh, you heard the trailer. Go to killjamxxx.com. All of the social media links will be there. You can subscribe to it. And yes, that was the wonderful Johnny Sims as Dr. Yuzna, who is an adorable, sweet old guy that horrible things will happen to.
As may happen to many people in this show about death battles and dystopian capitalism, and where, like, you know, anime pro wrestling meets with an advance in technology and genetic engineering that leads to just about every motherfucker you meet being a dangerous individual. I'm so hyped for this show. Killjam Triple X, it's coming out Go check out our socials on it.
Yes. Last thing I'll say, just because, man, I can't resist. We've got an incredible cast for this thing, beyond even,
Oh, yeah. Oh, you probably recognize some of those other voices in there. Like, if you're in the know. you might even know some of them from the Wanna team as well.
No,
that
it's
was
true.
Charlie Green in there for one of those voices.
Charlie Green's kind of major voice acting debut outside of small roles in Less is More and the Kingmaker histories as Vic Cadmium. We have wonderful little roles from all of your favorites of the channel, like Nicole, obviously Addison is Faustina, Zooey is Bellamy, Gus is in there as a very bizarre and fun character.
I'm not in the trailer. I'm not really a fighter.
He's a lover.
Oh, he's a lover. This character. Oh boy, I cannot wait for you guys to meet this character.
We've also got the voice of Gummy Goo from the Amazing Digital Circus as an organ harvester.
He lives!
We've got Freckle from Lackadaisy as, like, a kind of sweet, like, fanboy nerd. We've got people from Dimension 20, we've got people from Kingmaker, we've got people from Less is More, we've got people from the NoSleep podcast. Please check it out, follow it wherever you do your socials, more in it to come.
This is going to be an event, and there will be consequences. And speaking of...
Oh, yes, so, back to the good stuff. Now, Gus, I think...
The good news.
If that trailer wasn't any indication, Gus and I are very sort of character-first writers. Don't get me wrong, we love, like, a big, twisty plot as much as the next guy, but would it be fair to say of you and me, Gus, that, like, it is through character that we really get our claws in a piece of fiction?
Yeah, I would say that, like, you know, I like when a character's choice is the thing that, like, brings the consequences of the story onto them. Maybe leading to, you know, an event or two, if we're going to be borrowing this terminology. One movie that you and I discussed on the Patreon, $1 a month, no big deal, great backlog, hilarious stuff, is Overlord.
Great movie.
Which was going to be a Cloverfield movie, but it is full of, like, character choices that really well define our two lead characters and their different methodology, and I really latch on to stuff like that in fiction.
Which I think is a very great description. And now we are going to find how big the kind of batting cage for characters is on r/NoSleep.
We cannot be scared of these characters. Knowing that going in means that we cannot have 7-foot-tall muscle mommy. She's too scary. We can't have her in here.
If we can't have 7-foot-tall muscle mommy, I'm out. Sorry, it's a no from me. But, okay, how about, before we find out what your character can't be, let's find out what your main/posting/POV character can be on r/NoSleep.
Oh, that's good. That definitely won't leave any important character archetypes by omission.
Dude, this is so much weirder than you think it's gonna be. Alright, so, it starts with, so your main character can be a ghost or demon who is mentally/physically capable of posting and is demonstrably afraid. As with a criminal main character, they just can't brag about hurting others or wax poetic about how great being a demon/ghost is. They're posting to NoSleep because they're afraid. Already, that's so funny. It's the idea of like, yeah, look, I'm a demon, but this isn't about that. Don't dwell on it. Here's the issue here.
Look, I'm a demon, and I'm not gonna brag about some of the fucked up, like, tortures I've done to sinners while I live in hell, but also I saw a very scary dog the other day, and I was right spooked by it. It barked at me, and I was like, oh no, I need to go back to hell. It's too scary up here where dogs are.
Just the idea of this demonic beast, like, being a thing, and someone being like, oh my god, you're a demon, you prove that there are, like, realms other than these, like what metaphysical implications does this have? And he's like, shut the fuck up. Let me tell you what happened to me at Starbucks the other day.
Oh, you wouldn't believe it. Another demon who looked just like me tried to take my coffee.
And let me tell you, I was so scared.
I know that we're all biggy red and we have like horns and, from a human perspective, a lot of us look the same because we're supposed to be kind of a faceless mask to torture you all. But when he showed up and tried to take my coffee, it felt like a betrayal. And I was really frightened that I had been, people were going behind my back and doing this sort of stuff to me in the demon community.
It's just, when the demons are attacking other demons, it's a sorry state of affairs.
I saw a big spider in my house that I haunt because I am a ghost. I hate spiders, I'm so afraid.
It makes me, the idea of, a ghost or a demon being afraid of spiders makes me think of, do you know how in all of the old, English legends about the devil, it would be, him showing up and, making a deal with someone for something, and then the other person finding some, stupid loophole to, outsmart him, and the devil being fuck, I'm beholden to my own rules.
Yeah, the demon code prevents me from denying a rock-off challenge.
That's so funny. By the way, maybe this is going to be the most controversial thing I say in this episode. I am one of the writers who gave the world Evelyn Hooper, after all. But, the Chad Kroger Devil Went Down to Georgia cover fucking slaps. Go listen to it if you haven't. It's actually really good.
It might be unsurprising that the two of us who, wrote for that character, have also enjoyed a Nickelback from time to time.
Our Nickelback sympathizers.
Yeah, exactly. Also, speaking of sympathizers, I just love to say that, when they were talking about, how, there's criminal protagonists that aren't supposed to brag either. So it's just this idea of, listen, I'm a cold-hearted meth dealer. I don't want to brag about it, and I won't. Also, someone jumped out of an alleyway and went, booga, 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 and it was terrifying. And I had a heart attack right then and there, and that was the consequence of that event.
I am El Chapo, the head of the Sinaloa cartel, and let me tell you, the other day when I was at Starbucks, it just all becomes Starbucks-based horrors. Anyway, there are actually subheadings to the ghost demon thing. Further, the demon/ghost/spirit must be either possessing a living, mentally, and physically capable human to be able to write/post, or include a line or two about how they're using their remaining energy or has found a way to physically write/post using an internet-connected electronic device. And then afterwards, example. Sorry, I yelled that. It's in all caps. Your ghost main character found an internet-connected smartphone someone left unattended and is using all their energy/power to type and post on NoSleep. Alternatively, they've possessed a police officer or first responder at the site of their fatal accident to type and to post to NoSleep. They can't be possessing a baby/toddler, animal, inanimate object, even the smartphone/computer, someone in a coma or a corpse. This is monkey bone erasure. They can't write out their experience on paper unless someone finds their documents and posts it to NoSleep, making the story a found document story.
Henry Galley, there's a lot to unpack here, but I can't overlook the fact that this might be the first time in all the writing advice from all the sources that I have ever encountered that is mandating that you explain how words appeared in the medium that you were observing to consume the story. Are we there now? Is that where we are? Holy fuck!
And this, by the way, is a perfect example of what I was talking about earlier, where this whole idea of immersion and what's realistic and what isn't, where it's I don't think I would have believed this story until the ghost explained with its limited spectral energy that it was using up its life force to manipulate an iPhone to post to r/NoSleep. It's the kayfabe gets a little bit ridiculous at a point.
This is absolutely beyond the pale and unbelievable, because I'm just imagining the story begins with let me tell you about the scariest thing that happened, and then the prospective reader is no, let me stop you right there. How did you even say this to me? How did that sentence get in front of me? I feel taken out of this story. That's a major plot hole. What are we doing?
I want something where this person is like a first responder, like operator, like over the phone. Someone like, please, I'm in danger. Then how are you even calling? Goodbye. Hangs up.
You must not be in that much danger if you can actually, like, punch in this number. So, yeah, don't call back, all
It
right?
reminds me of that joke from the Shining parody in The Simpsons when Marge connects to Chief Wiggum and she's like, please help, my husband is trying to kill my family. Over. Oh, glad that's over. That sounded really scary.
yeah, exactly. I'm just imagining like this like bizarre nonsense world where people like behave like this. It's just like you call up like the local pizzeria and you're like, hey, can I have pepperoni, double cheese? I'm really hungry. My family's hungry. And they're like, well, you don't sound hungry.
This is Reddit world. Reddit world is the ultimate, like, it's just where everyone is like comically incredulous about like really normal things.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
It continues, by the way. So the next one is artificial intelligence. So long as it experiences fear, your character still has to be afraid and going through a scary personal experience, even if it's AI. So, Pomni, the other day I was at Starbucks and someone just like me reached for my coffee.
And I was like, oh, I'm scared.
Give me time, I'm thinking of the consequence.
My eyes popped out of my mouth, I was so afraid.
That is a perfect NoSleep story right there. Kane from the Amazing Digital Circus gets spooked at Starbucks and his eyes pop out. Oh gosh,
What is it with like people getting spooked at Starbucks that is like so funny?
Because Starbucks is such a non-threatening, banal place, I can't think of anywhere more like kind of boring and nondescript than a Starbucks. They don't even play jazz in there anymore. They just play top 40 stuff.
No, yeah, exactly, because it's people go in there to like literally like recharge.
It's a liminal space.
Yeah, and I say this from like, I'm from Boston where like, Dunkin' Donuts is like the go-to place around
Boston
here.
makes me feel good.
I know. It took me out. I couldn't react. You rendered me speechless.
Flashbanged, yeah. Alright, it continues. So, a non-deity-like being from folklore or mythology, such as a selkie, vampire, or werewolf, who is mentally/physically capable of posting and is demonstrably afraid. As above, they just can't brag about hurting others. They must be sharing a scary personal experience. They should either have hands capable of typing, or be able to speak to text, or be relating their story to another character who's writing and posting for them. And hilariously below that it says, you can't use famous characters such as Dracula, Carmilla, anyone from Twilight, True Blood, Supernatural, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, etc.
Again, we're still on this whole thing of like they need to be able to write the story in order for the story to be written. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
I'm just also thinking like, I am Dracula and I had a very scary day yesterday. I stubbed my toe and I did not know that the wall was this far out. My house might be falling apart. Blah.
I can assure you that nothing scary that happened actually had anything to do with the fact that I am, in fact, Dracula. It was a completely unrelated event.
I did not look both ways before crossing the street and was almost hit by a Hummer.
I was so scared.
I nearly turned into a bat.
Someone driving into a vampire, and they have like rigged the grill of their truck to be just covered in wooden stakes sticking out.
The vampire is still struggling and Rah! And then they turn the car into the local pizzeria, and it says fresh garlic pizza for a limited time only, and then just BAM!
That's so fun. The thing that sprays the windshield wiper fluid, that's rigged with holy water for if they start smashing on the glass. Hey bro, did you get the new Ford Van Helsing? Great mileage on that thing.
I was gonna say too, it's like, is there no place here? And maybe fair enough if there's not, but is there no place here for a kind of like, I saw a supernatural monster and I beat the shit out of it type of story? Like it all has to be like, I'm very scared and there's like,
and I peed and shit myself.
An event and consequence. Yeah, like it, but yeah, none of the, never outside the pre-approved, like, wide eyes, hunching over, chicken skin, all that stuff. Like,
who calls it chicken skin? I've never even heard of that. Sorry if you do.
Redditors, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so, man. Gave me mad chicken skin. Hearing about chicken skin just makes me hungry.
Yeah, leave a comment with the word chicken skin to tell us whether or not it's a saying that you say, or if it just sounds delicious and tasty.
God. So this next one is interesting. It's a little bit more philosophical. So your protagonist can be mentally and or physically ill, so long as their health is not the focus of the horror. The horror of the story must be something other than mental/physical health issues. Mental/physical health can't be the focus of NoSleep stories, which I find really annoying because, like, okay, here's the thing, getting, like, properly serious for a second. Obviously there is a legacy of people legitimately demonizing people with mental and physical health issues, and that's shitty, obviously.
Yeah, there's definitely, like, a precedent for, like, very exploitative horror. Like, there's a reason that there are, like, exploitation films and that genre exists, but there's also an equally, like, I think valid tradition, a way more valid, excuse me, tradition of people... Yeah, exploiting people, but also people using their own lived experiences to create, like, powerful body horror stories, psychological horror stories. Like, the recent film The Substance comes to mind, which Charlie Green and I did a video on. Go and check that out. But there's this feeling of just like, okay, like, why do this? Like, you can have representation, but don't make the story about it. It's like, that's just, like, presuming a criticism towards, like, a type of story rather than, like, letting the author, represent, presumably, themselves in their own way.
It'd be like watching Get Out and being like, man, having your brain taken out is scary enough. I don't know if they needed to bring race into this.
Yeah, it's a little odd. Like, I didn't get that element. It seemed a little bit extraneous. Like, getting like, mad scientist hypnotized, that's already freaky enough. That would be a bad thing to happen to me.
And obviously we're joking, but yeah, it does come back to this thing that at the end of the day, for as much as it can be exploitative, as Gus said, there is a grand tradition of people who do have different kind of mental and physical disabilities, abstracting their experience through horror to help others empathize with their like anxieties and their struggles. And it's just a real shame that so many of these rules, while I completely get the intention behind it is pure, shuts the door on so much potentially really cool and meaningful art. It's really a throwing the baby out with the bathwater situation.
Yeah, like, this rule especially, I think, is pretty rough, because it's like, if you can include, like, a ghost or a demon or a selkie or whatever, like, why should you not be able to represent, like, the spectrum of human physical attributes or mental attributes? Like, aren't we telling these stories about, like, fear and anxiety to get closer to some of the things that, like, trouble us in our reality? Like, this isn't a, like, we're escaping to a world where, like, ghosts and demons will haunt us. So we're preparing ourselves to, like, investigate what makes us afraid in a little bit more depth, I would assume.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I think it is a shame that so many of these rules are basically, like, locking people onto a track and being like, no, we want stories to be superficial here. We want it to be, I was in some place, a thing jumped out and said, ooga booga booga, and I was really scared, but I escaped.
Also, I'm a selkie. Let me take a selkie.
Also, I'm a selkie. Let me... Also, I'm a Selkie, but that is not relevant.
That's not what this is. And I'm also an able-bodied and not mentally ill Selkie, and I'm not scary, and I don't have hooves, I have fingers, and I can type messages, and it was really scary, okay, you guys? Don't make fun of me. I followed all the rules.
Absurd. Alright, so I'm now going to move on to what your main character can't be.
Oh boy.
A stalker / rapist / murderer / serial killer simply bragging about torturing, assaulting, killing, or otherwise victimizing others. Even if they feel guilty, the main character victimizing others isn't allowed as the focus of the story. You can have a criminal main character, but they must be afraid of something other than being caught, and their fear must be the main horror element. For example, a serial killer could be afraid of another even worse serial killer stalking and threatening them, or a stalker could be hunted down by a supernatural being, etc. On NoSleep, victimization includes, but may not be limited to, abuse of any kind, kidnapping, holding someone captive, torturing, essaying, murdering, etc. If the entire story focuses on nothing but your main character victimizing others, torturing them, killing them, confining them, etc., it's not a scary personal experience. This includes the character being in prison. This also includes the character being mentally ill. What do you think, Gus?
It's reasonable to have, like, a terms of service about stuff like this, but I just hate that I feel like the intuitive response to this is, well, what stories are they talking about? And how many people are going to, like, just write them in spite of this, specifically because this rule exists in this way.
And that's the thing. Obviously, there are a lot of stories out there in various mediums that are exceptions to this that are still great horror stories, such as American Psycho, Maniac, Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. So many of the stories of Edgar Allan Poe are about, like, murder, revenge plots, people losing their mind, like the Cask of Amontillado or the Telltale Heart.
Yeah, like, I think it's one of those things where, like, I get if you're trying to have a certain kind of community, you put limit on, like, certain, like, gratuitous elements just for, like, the subreddit or whatever. That's all well and good. I just think it's one of those things where, like, it's lumping in a lot of stuff and just being like, oh, this is all just going to be like The Painter, like analog horror.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, that's the thing. It's the existence of things like the Painter and other sort of lower tier kind of splatterpunk offerings that causes me to be of two minds about this, because, again, I think this rule is unnecessarily restrictive. I think you can tell great stories where the main character is just an absolute monster for a variety of reasons, but I also have to put myself in the shoes of the mods, how many stories they must have had to delete that just read, like, the fantasies of a very sick individual with like no garnishings on top of it, like kind of like first person like torture porn before they were like, do you know what, I think we just need to like outlaw this here.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, I sympathize from a mod's perspective. From, like, our perspective, obviously, Henry, you and I, like, we really wouldn't be into the kind of thing that's being described here, generally. And I imagine, like, if we were just scrolling through the subreddit and we saw something like that, and we read a little bit, and we're like, not our thing, and we would, like, move on. But when you are faced with this many stories and you're inundated with them and it's part of your job to review all of them, you must want to mitigate that a little bit if you especially don't like it. So maybe it's just one of those things where it's like, don't become a Reddit mod. That's my advice.
But that's the thing. I think in some ways running a successful Reddit and having artistic integrity are gonna have competing goals, because the thing is, and again, this is some of the work we're NDA'd for, Gus and I have done ghostwriting work for some things that are like directed at much younger audiences, and the level of restriction on there could at times be so maddening that I think it definitely made me like radically like anti-artistic censorship, because at the end of the day I would rather people like writing absolute filth that doesn't rise to the top because, meritocracy, than the idea of there is anyone who has some official capacity to tell you what you can and can't write in terms of like, no, this content is wrong. Because I do believe it's a slippery slope in this instance.
Yeah, exactly. And for my sake, like, I've been getting into sort of like, lit RPG stuff recently as research for one of my own writing projects, and there's definitely stuff in that genre that is like pretty like egregious and rough, because it's adapting some of the less wholesome elements of like D&D, where the whole like you roll for seduction and like certain types of monsters having certain reputations, all that kind of stuff is baked in. And I'm not going to make any recommendations or any like call outs to anything I've read, but it is one of those things where it's like I feel like I have a broader understanding of things for that stuff being accessible to me, and thus I think it is worthwhile for it to be accessible to everybody who is of the age in which they have the context to experience it.
Yeah, well, we all think that at the end of the day, adults should be able to make their own informed choices on this stuff, and they're in an ideal world shouldn't be overlords who preemptively decide what art you should and shouldn't see.
Yeah, in this, like, precisely, like, things being, like, a little bit more rough and having certain elements, that is why tags and content warnings exist. Like, that's their purpose. Not to say that this shouldn't exist or that, like, this is, it falls into some nebulous category of, like, bad, but to clearly label something so that those who are into it can find it, and those who would have a bad time with it know when to step away from it.
Exactly. So, returning to what your character can't be, because here's the thing, a lot of these rules are basically rewordings of they can't be the opposite of all the things they can be. But this one I find kind of fascinating. So they can't be a deity or deity-like figure, such as a god of any pantheon or religious text, a demigod, an angel, a grim reaper, etc. Basically, the being in question is somehow superhuman and or capable of superhuman deeds. Their powers can affect the world/universe, etc. And then this is a fascinating thing underneath it. This includes, but isn't limited to, Satan/Lucifer, the Archangel Michael, Zeus, Ra, Neptune, Hercules/Heracles, Osiris, Anubis, Athena, the personification of death, etc. Even if you make up your own deity/deity-like figure, they're not allowed to be the main character of your NoSleep story. I want to know who wrote the story that was told from the perspective of Ra. From ancient Egyptian mythology.
I know we've been making the same joke the whole video, but it's so easy of just like, I am Ra, god of the sun. I went to Starbucks and a guy who looked just like me took my coffee and it really scared me.
No, exactly. Like, what this feels like. It was that old Lee Evans joke of, when you like buy a new microwave or something and there's the little silica gel packet on the inside that says do not eat. That means someone ate that once.
Yeah, exactly.
Like someone bought that microwave and was like, "Ooh, I got a microwave." And they included a free meal with it.
I'm Neptune, the god of the sea. Boy, do I love committing egregiously horrific crimes. Oh no, a roach in my burger! Ah!
I'm the Lord of the Sea. Get me out of here.
I'm the Lord of the Sea. Get me laid.
That's a little one for the for the other fans out there.
originals
Like, other
of-
things
yeah.
they've included on here is that you're not allowed to post from other dimensions unless you explain how. You can't post from space or another planet. You can't post while, like, drunk or high. You're not allowed to state or imply that our world / reality / lives are in any way a dream, a hallucination, illusion, simulation, or otherwise not real. Can't be trapped in a time loop.
So not only is this like pointlessly limiting, like I don't even get why some of these
Yeah,
things
like,
are off
why
limits.
not? You know?
Yeah, why not? But also, it's one of those things where, once again, and this is kind of a general writing advice tip, I know, like, you know, we're
People
bringing
do come
one
here
in.
for those.
My thinking is this. When you're in a position where you're like, oh, how do I explain XYZ thing that does not have a real explanation? You should not be trying to find how you would explain it to a real person in the real world and how they would believe you. They're not going to. Create an internally consistent, interesting, cool reason, and then have that be the reason.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think it's realism, which I think is a very rigid concept, versus verisimilitude, you know, suspension of disbelief, which if you've written a thing well and the concept is good, even if it's really out there, there's a good chance the audience is gonna follow you. Maybe this is controversial, but you shouldn't write your work to cater to the least imaginative person you could think of.
Like, what would Pacific Rim, the first movie, not the second one, we're not going there, but what would that look like if they were, like, discussing the square cube law and how the Jaegers were able to break the constraints of it and be in humanoid form at that height? It would be boring as shit and pointless.
Again, I feel kind of bad saying it because it's such low-hanging fruit, but that's so fucking Reddit, you know?
It is. This is like the soil maps of world building. This is like, you know, trying to fit a planet eater and a clan of wizards in the same universe. It's this like endless explanations to the point that you never actually get involved in any kind of story or plotting because you're just kind of caught up in like reasoning porn.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. Which leads us, by the way, onto our next piece of official No Sleep advice, which is a segment called General Fears, What If, etc. General Fears, by the way, was the bravest military man I ever knew. Despite the name.
Yeah.
So fucking... Meg can tell you, I make that joke anytime something is called, like, General something. I'm so fucking lame.
Well, in this case, General Fears being a brave individual, I think is actually a perfect, like, that's something there. That's a good version of the joke. It was all leading to this.
Give us your headcanon about General Fears.
I just gotta say, I'm really excited for Reddit to explain to me the concept of being afraid on this horror subreddit.
I mean, it already did. It basically had like a bullet list of here are the physical symptoms of fear, because you definitely won't be finding that on No Sleep these days.
Do these mods believe that horror is primarily consumed and written by people who are unfamiliar or like inexperienced in the emotion of fear?
Yeah, it's all written implicitly for Jeff Bridges from the movie Fearless. Like, it's the most, like, so many of these things feel as if, like, they are written for, like, actual aliens who are completely unfamiliar with the human experience. It's baffling.
I decided to get into horror writing so I could finally be afraid.
Yeah, the Giga Chat's back.
Yeah.
Fear, an interesting emotion. Why does this feel like dialogue that Unate would have?
yeah,
That is the
from
lead
Book of
character from the
Elsewhere.
Book of Elsewhere. Keanu Reeves is an edgy self-insert fan fiction that he wrote with China Miéville. We did a review on Patreon if you want to check that out.
It is a delightfully bizarre piece of pop culture. I'm just thinking of Unute saying something like, I have perfect memory, and I can remember exactly how many times that I've been afraid. And that number is 0.
Yeah.
0 is a number.
Life is just a
Get
series of
over it.
events leading to consequences, and then further events are the consequence of those consequences, and so humanity perpetuates itself, unfeeling. Ugh.
Ooh. Sometimes it feels like I, Unite, am an event without a consequence, or a consequence without an event. You take your pick. Scientists, it's not my job to define me. I simply am me, and I wish to maybe not be, but not completely not be. I'm Unite.
Fuck that book.
I'm so cool.
Anyway, so now we are on to, we're back into the military domain of general fears.
General Fear's chicken.
But of Colonel Sanders, this is General Fears. Oh, General So's. Oh.
But I also like that it's General Fears and then chicken, because like if you're a
Oh my
coward, you're a
God.
chicken. So it works on multiple levels.
Cut that from the audio. We need to copyright this. These heathens can't hear it.
Yeah.
On NoSleep, stories can't be based on what-if scenarios, what almost happened, what could have happened, or what might happen in the future. They also can't be based on generalized fears, such as fear of death, the dark, spiders, heights, etc. Because NoSleep stories are framed as scary personal experiences, the main character must have gone through, or be going through, events that are actually happening, or actually happened to them in the past, not something that might happen or could have happened. And here are examples. Example 1. John has a major fear of heights. Allowed. Despite his fear, John often hangs out with his friends and neighbor Alan on the roof of their apartment building. One night, Alan learns of John's fear and tries to get him to stand on the edge of the roof. John refuses and tries to leave. But Alan drags him over and either throws John off the roof or accidentally drops/pushes him. John survives somehow and now has an even greater fear of heights. Not allowed. John makes a post pondering why people are afraid of heights and why he became afraid of them, and what it is that makes heights so scary and how he could possibly overcome it. There's no event, no consequence, and no true fear. Just John navel-gazing / being introspective about his phobia. And the other example, which I'm just going to give you before we get into discussing this, is example 2. Jane buys a new car and starts having dreams about it. At first they're innocent enough, usually just her driving around town at night. Then she starts waking up behind the wheel of the car at night in random parts of the city. A few times she's woken up after small accidents, like the car running up on the curb or rolling through a red light / four-way stop. Eventually, she dreams that the car drove itself into the nearest river with Jane trapped inside and below it, which I've got to say, I quite like that concept. But underneath says, allowed. Jane wakes up, realizes she's actually trapped in the car and struggles to get out before the car is completely submerged. Although the car seems to do everything it can to keep her trapped, she's able to escape and get to safety. Jane survives her experience and gets rid of the car. Not allowed. Jane wakes up, realizes it was just a nightmare and is now afraid to use her new car. This isn't a scary personal experience, even though there is an event and a consequence, because nothing actually happened to Jane. She just had a bad dream. Also not allowed. Jane wakes up, realizes it was just a nightmare and is now afraid to use her new car. She sells it and later learns that the new owner was killed in an accident exactly like the one Jane dreamed of. This isn't a scary personal experience because Jane isn't directly impacted by what happened. Someone else died in the manner she dreamed, but Jane herself is alive and well. I hate this.
Alright, so Henry, looking at this and aside from the examples given, we could get into the minutia of that, but what we said earlier about censorship, I think also applies to this with even more emphasis on how unnecessary this is. Because you get your story banned, nuked off the subreddit, disallowed for being subjectively boring by some arbitrary criteria? What are we doing here, guys? There can't be listen, your guy didn't fall off a fucking roof. He just said he didn't want to fall off a roof. Banned! Get that shit out of here! That's not scary enough. Fuck you! You think you could be here on this Reddit? No, that's not a scary. 0 out of 10. Fuck you. Go away. Die.
Yeah.
Sorry, that became an event. That became an event for me.
And what I'm going to say is the consequence. But that's the thing. It is a case of it's so subjective. It's so censorious because, in my honest opinion,
I think also the length to which these explanations are written out and described, and then the both sides, the allowed and not allowed, are given, and they're equally detailed. You're just left with a oh, okay, well, what events need to change between these two things, and what wiggle room is there left in between before I pull the wrong straw in the Jenga tower of storytelling and cause all my karma to get nuked because my account got banned from this Reddit.
No, exactly. That's the thing. I know it would be very easy to look at this video, and again, like we said earlier, it's their Reddit. What does it matter, really? What do you guys even care? You're off doing other stuff now. What upsets me about it is, had I been born a couple of years later and had still somehow the series of events and consequences that is my life shaked out in a similar way, things would have diverged massively when I got to the point when I was confident enough to start posting my short stories online, because I would have gone onto this subreddit, seen the rules, been super fucking intimidated by the idea that I might do everything right but then trip up on one rule and get banhammered. I don't know if I would have ever posted that. If I never posted it, I never would have been picked up by NoSleep. If I hadn't worked for NoSleep, I never would have gotten the opportunity to make Conjuria for Shudder, which meant I never would have met you, or any of these other people. From there, never would have gone on to make hilarious disasters like the Heads of Sierra Blanca, or be involved in really fun projects like Less is Morgue, or the Hidden
Kingmaker
Frequencies,
Histories,
Kingmaker, and now Killjam XXX. I didn't even know when I was writing that audio drama podcasts were this big thriving world that had a surprising amount of money in it. Ditto, I never would have had the portfolio to get me a bunch of the other NDA'd jobs, which are the kind of writing work that makes up most of the paycheck that me and Meg live off of. It's this really kind of scary It's a Wonderful Life thing where if when I was coming up, NoSleep was not a place that had really open arms to creativity, I don't know what my life would be like now. And obviously, yeah, time doesn't go backwards, but I worry about the next generation of people who want to ply their writing trade online.
Yeah, and to add on to that with my own life experience, what you're saying is really insightful here, because I owe my beginnings in art to the very particular mixture of the fact that I went to a good school with teachers who had extracurriculars related to writing. One of my teachers who taught a screenwriting class also did an independent study with me where I got to sort of cut my teeth a little bit more on that medium. I talked to that teacher recently in exchanging emails. That writing class has less and less attendance because anything with writing scares people off now. And there's a combination between people being afraid to step into what is, so scrutinized with all these communities, but also it's one of those things where the AI and Chat GPT of it all, where people are being told that oh, that's the fast track to fulfilling your assignments and stuff. So there was that. And then there was the forums that I would write on, that I would just write fan fiction on. Particularly, there was like a Naruto forum called Leaf Ninja, which no longer has a fanfiction section these days. But back in the day, it did have like you could just write anything and people would comment on it, people would criticize it, but like there were like very little rules other than like, probably like Guro was no, even then there were like stories that were like, gory and fucked up and sexual. Like it's one of these things where like you kind of are faced with this weird, bizarre, like entropic feeling that a lot of the same outlets that were there to give people freedom don't exist for this generation. And that's really sad, honestly.
No, it's true. And don't get me wrong. Like, as Gus and myself have found, to be honest, a big part of the reason we got into the world of audio drama, which is a world we love, and if you are some of the portion of people who clicked on this because of the mention of the Magnus Archives in the title, we assume you love as well, is because there are not as many places that are quite as friendly and conducive to completely original writing of, like, especially genre fiction these days. Like, obviously, there are a bunch of, like, quite wonderful places for fanfic, and we've always been big supporters of fanfic here, and we think it's a great way for writers to cut their teeth, find community. But the thing is, a big part of the reason that we do this is, frankly, despite knowing lots of animators and artists, animation and art is incredibly time and labor intensive. And for us, audio drama found this great mix of there are platforms with significantly more discoverability for it than there are for just like kind of raw writing, and it gives it that kind of extra oomph where it's like, well, yeah, it's writing, but maybe, say it's an anthology story thing like the Magnus Archives. It's the author of them reading it out, and slowly a like larger meta-narrative forms around it. Or in the case of a lot of our shows, which tend to be these kind of like modern full cast audio plays like the Kingmaker Histories and Less is More, and the same will be true of Killjam Triple X. But it is really a tragedy that we are seeing the death of a lot of these spaces as the kind of attention economy arms race becomes more like nightmarish system gaming and Skinner boxes. The like, destroys the opportunities for people who will go on to make really cool audio dramas or YouTube series or publish books or whatever, find their audience, find their people, practice their craft in a way that costs them nothing but time. And yeah, it's just a real tragedy to see that there's a dearth of that these days.
Exactly. And I don't want to be fully doom and gloom about it. Like, some of the communities we've listed, like NoSleep in particular, but also like, Leaf Ninja, as I said, those may be gone, but...
If there are successes, please tell us in the comments. We'd love to know, genuinely, because we'll shout them out, we'll promote them.
Yeah, there are almost certainly communities out there that still have this kind of vibe, but the internet has, like, shrunk a lot more, and the visible portion of it is, like, the tip of the iceberg now, with it being really condensed to these particular forms of social media, and the worry becomes that people will forget to look, or they won't have, the kind of communities that will compel them to make these connections and to look. Because, like, frankly, the alienation of our modern society has only gotten more prevalent. People have less time, they're more isolated, and the social medias that we have are a little bit more antisocial. And I know I'm kind of sounding like a boomer right now, but all of this is to say that this is all... like, the connections you can make and the places that your art can thrive are all worth fighting for, and you need to do so more.
Yeah, no, I mean, we have always said on this show, and it continues to be true, the greatest artistic quote-unquote resource you can ever have is friends. and see our other videos for ways to find them. But this links quite nicely back into another thing that is, I would say, kind of suggesting a preferred tone for these stories.
All right, yeah, go on.
This-
Let's get dragged back into the misery.
This is comedy, tragedy, wholesomeness. Alrighty, are you ready?
Oh, I love Reddit. It's
I know.
so good.
Big Chungus Unite 100.
Wholesome big Unite. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so stories posted to r/NoSleep are framed as scary personal experiences. Man, I'm so not sick of hearing that. And treated as true, whether or not they actually are. Within NoSleep Immersion, the character posting is sharing a terrifying experience they previously had or are currently having. They're not an author posting an obviously fictional story designed to scare the reader. Horror must be the focus of every story. Yeah, no, heaven forbid people are ever tricked into thinking that they're reading a well-made piece of fiction. God, that'd be so much less fun than thinking, well, this is definitely something that could theoretically happen.
What I do when I go onto the horror subreddit and look for a horror story is that I click on something and immediately commit amnesia in some bizarre self-hypnosis method so that what I'm reading is entirely new text that will hopefully not bore me, hopefully not disturb me in a specific way, and hopefully just scare me in a way that was completely unexpected, as if a stranger was telling me a scary experience that was an event with consequences, but nothing else.
Exactly. And funnily enough, they shadow that, saying, because of this, not every type of horror or every style of story is allowed on NoSleep. Horror must be the focus of the story, not humor, wholesomeness, being meta, or trolling. Comedic and wholesome horror are allowed on NoSleep, so long as those elements don't outweigh the horror. The story can end well and even be heartwarming, but the experience itself must be scary. If the story relies on being funny or wholesome more than being scary, try r/comedic NoSleep or r/wholesome NoSleep instead. Yeah, partitioning them off into those specific things definitely wouldn't lead to them getting samey or boring.
Yeah, and also it's one of those things where it's like, why in God's green name would I trust Reddit mods to discern the emotional balance?
Yeah, they get their abacus out and are like, okay, that's a funny moment, that's a scary moment. No, sorry, there was one more
wholesome.
funny block than scary. We gotta ban this.
Ooh, that was slightly more confusing than it was frightening, so I'm sorry, banned forever, goodbye, you're gone, you don't exist anymore.
Which leads to tragic elements/events such as suicide, the death of loved ones, including pets, miscarriages, etc., very morbid to list those specifically, are allowed in NoSleep stories, but aren't allowed as the main focus of horror. If tragic elements are removed and your story isn't scary, it's not fit for NoSleep. The story can't be meta, fluff, or a joke/satire, or a troll post either. Your character can be funny, but must, above all, be telling a scary personal experience which scares/scared them. And, you know, you might be wondering, okay, that's a lot of stuff to say. What does that mean? They have examples.
But before we launch into the examples, I just gotta say, Henry, don't you think Hereditary would be such a better movie if it didn't have fraught family relationships or, like, deaths in the family, and it was just, you know, a bunch of cultists just showing up and doing a bad thing to a random group of people? Wouldn't that be so much scarier?
Just thought, fuck this grief shit, get to the goddamn demon!
I want to see a naked man go, heh, demon time!
That should have been the first frame of the movie.
That should have been the line of dialogue of just him going, heh, demon time!
This is the consequence of your events, Peter.
Peter!
What's happening?
This is worse than the time I had Hereditary happen to me.
This is worse than that time that a consequence followed an event.
This is worse than that event that happened.
This is worse than that time I was in Starbucks. Okay, I'll stop. Alright, so here are the examples. Not allowed. John makes a post describing his parents' death in a car accident the day of his graduation. The entire post is about the accident, plus how John coped with the deaths and how he's grateful for everything he has and always remembers to be thankful. This example is a tragedy, combined with being introspective / navel-gazing. So funny. Next, Not Allowed.
Wow.
Jane's best friend, Alice, I don't even know if I want to read, like, these are such
You
bummers.
don't have to!
Yeah, I think I'll skip past those. Like, those are real bummers.
Yeah.
But these are just listing sad things, then being like, can't do that.
That's not a story. That is just a human experience that happens sometimes.
That isn't anything to me.
That's not scary. It doesn't matter to us. Get it out of here.
That's just so funny. Again, just the idea of, like, I get it. They don't want the whole sub to be overtaken by just people sharing random anecdotes from their life. But the thing is, the way that Reddit works is that if people aren't liking and upvoting a thing, it will disappear from feeds, you know? Can't it be a meritocracy? Can't we democratize picking what stories people like and don't like, rather than having it be this, like, artistic autocracy?
Hey, we're moderators, but we don't want to do our job. If any of you make a bad post, or a post that underperforms, or a post that's a little off the norm, that means that we have to deal with that post. So please don't post bad, alright? Never post cringe. Only post 100% bangers that we will have a good time reading. And no navel gazing. No navel gazing.
That's taking up valuable demon time.
It's valuable time that could be spent on the scary event and its consequences.
And on descriptions of the character physically being frightened and unknown.
Again, this is, we've signed NDAs and stuff for this, but this does remind me of some of the freelance writing we've had to do with just this emphasis on, like,
keep it in the present, don't give us thoughts. Yeah, no.
Oh, man.
The next thing, and what's going to happen now is, we have one more thing from the Reddit Authority. It was honestly what I'm about to read you was, I think, the impetus behind wanting to even make this. And it is, they are using real life, like, classic pieces of short form horror literature to illustrate what they do not want on this subreddit.
Oh boy.
And this is where I think the horror
sounds
purists...
really fun.
Yeah, this is where the horror purists, I think, are going to start to really have a bad time. If they weren't already, which, you know, if you weren't, you're a stronger writer than me. Congratulations.
If you made it all the way through these rules and you're like, I can do this easy, this doesn't even limit me, in fact, I've got this, put stronger than Henry and Gus in your comment, because you've earned it.
We begin with The Monkey's Paw, which is a story, despite coming out in 1902, is still regularly used as an idiom online today. You know, like 122 years later.
They're actually coming for the Monkey's Paw? That's such a perfect cautionary tale, and it's like really frightening.
This story was written 9 years before the events of the Kingmaker histories. That's how old it is. And that is a pre-World War I fantasy period piece, which, by the way, also has Johnny Sims in it. I'm not going to tell you which episode, you gotta listen and you'll find him. But he plays a weird, mad cannibal, and it's great. So, are you about to hear why The Monkey's Paw is shit?
The Monkey Paw is bad, and here's why. It's like a YouTube, like, in like 2
for anyone
hours.
who doesn't know, they have actually included a summary here. Written by W.W. Jacobs and published... World War Jacobs. and published... Sorry.
Okay,
That's
alright.
so cheap.
Alright.
But that is nothing compared to the joke we made about an acronym before we started recording. Anyway, written by W.W. Jacobs and published in 1902, The Monkey's Paw is a short horror story focusing on Mr. and Mrs. White. In the story, their friend, a sergeant, reluctantly gives them a mummified monkey's paw, which is said to grant 3 wishes to whomever is holding it. Every wish comes with a consequence, though, usually one the user can't predict. The sergeant himself used up his 3 wishes and warns his friends not to use it, saying the previous owner's final wish had been to die. Naturally, the Whites don't listen and make their first wish to have £200. They get their money not long after as a consideration when their adult son Herbert is killed in a horrific workplace accident. Days later, against Mr. White's better judgment, they make their second wish, for Herbert to be alive again. It takes some time, but the Whites hear a knock at the door. Before Mrs. White can open it and see whom or whatever is on the other side, Mr. White makes his final wish, though we're never told what exactly it was, only that the knocking stopped. And then right below it, this wouldn't work on NoSleep because, in part, the majority of the story, while scary, focuses on tragic events. Herbert, an innocent third party, is killed horribly because of his parents' first wish. He's then possibly resurrected and killed a second time. Mr. and Mrs. White now have to live without their first son believing they caused his death. Then, the second part is, the wish affects Herbert, the White's son, not Mr. and Mrs. White directly. There's no consequence which affects Mr. and Mrs. White themselves, only their son, a third party. Holy shit.
Oh, yeah, and we would much rather have riveting stuff like your coffee being taken by a doppelganger at the local Starbucks.
There's something so insane and so extraordinarily ignorant about the idea that, like, a person getting mangled in a factory accident and dying is a bad thing only for them. And not for anyone who loves them.
This is Reddit, Henry. I could be mean now.
I don't know love here.
It feels like it's one of those things where it's like human connection is a foreign concept. Fear is something that you need rules in order to create. Emotions need to exist within the perfectly set up parameters. One of the worst things that can happen to your day is, again, getting your coffee stolen. Or, having your Tinder date be a serial killer who is very open about that fact and explains it to you. Because then you go, ooh, that's kind of cringe. I can't believe I'm dating a serial killer. That goes against my ethics. And they're like, yeah, well, I was hoping you would accept me. But I guess not.
I guess I'll kill you.
It's just a bad date. Yeah, I guess I'll kill you, but I'm going to give you a running start. It's so funny to take any of the examples we've been given earlier in this like Reddit thread and compare them to something as like timeless and unsettling as the Monkey's Paw. And just be like, we don't approve. We don't approve. Actually, it's not right for our illustrious community.
Well, what it reminds me of is this really funny thing Addison showed me of someone made this like Twitter thread of it was like, share what you think are the scariest paintings. And one of them is that famous painting that I love, which is the dog standing on guard at like the open door with just dark beyond it. It was so scary that a version of it was used as an alt DVD cover for When Evil Lurks. If you know, you know. And and someone in the comments earnestly put, "This isn't scary at all. Look, I made it scary." And they edited some glowing eyes into the doorway.
Oh yeah, look, it's the spooky monster. It's so dumb.
Now
it's so dumb. Yeah.
Horror for the imagination deficient.
It follows the scary rules, therefore it's scary. Give me the upvotes. It fits the rules. It's scary. I didn't do anything wrong.
It's absurd. So the next one, by the way, is the Cask of Amontillado that we referenced earlier.
Oh, we
for
can't
anyone
be
that doesn't
doing
know.
this.
Which, again, it's so funny. Some of these stories are so iconic, they are still regularly in memes today and have, like, modern adaptations. Again, this and the Telltale Heart, which is the next one, by the way, were prominently featured in the really great Fall of the House of Usher miniseries on Netflix. So they are timeless, despite being from... The Cask of Amontillado was written in 1846.
I cannot wait to hear what is wrong with it and what is just absolutely not unsettling about it whatsoever. There is nothing to these interaction between these two men that would lead you to believe that this is a scary or dangerous situation.
Ridiculous. So it's written by Edgar Allan Poe, as you probably know by this point. The story is told in the first person by the character Montressa to an unnamed listener. Montressa reveals that 50 years ago he killed his friend Fortunato over a perceived slight. During Carnival, Montressa lured Fortunato into the catacombs with the promise of Amontillado sherry and kept his friend drunk as they walked. Then, Montressa manipulated Fortunato into entering a niche, where Montressa chained Fortunato to the wall and walled him in, ignoring Fortunato's cries for mercy. Montressa brags that no one has ever found Fortunato's remains. This wouldn't work on NoSleep because, in part, there's no scary event or consequence for Montressa, the main character, and he's never afraid. In fact, he's proud of himself and thinks he's totally justified. And then Montressa victimizes Fortunato. Readers would be afraid of Montressa, not afraid for him.
What is this, like, weird, like moralization? Like, I don't know how to even describe what this is. How is it, like, if you're not in the perspective of the person who is being, like walled in, that's not the scary event? If you're the one who's like, oh, well, here's the thing, the guy who does the walling in is actually the one, he's the one that is the perspective, so therefore, I don't feel afraid, because, what?
Yeah, it is, obviously, there are many reasons it's scary. People who have imaginations can imagine that it would be frightening to be walled up. Can also imagine the horror of, damn, being a person doing that to someone is pretty horrifying. And as well, the idea that there are people like Montressa out there who, you don't know that one of your friends might have, violent designs on you right now. That's scary.
The idea that something as simple as, a social slight and faux pas could result in an elaborate murder on a night of festivity like Carnival. It's a good story. We don't even need to sing the praises of it. The reasons given here are so, they're so out of, they feel so abnormal. I don't know how else to put it.
And again, you'll see this more with the Telltale Heart, but it's just the idea that if these guys were behind the, publishing interests of New England in the 1840s, we never would have had Edgar Allan Poe.
This is, making me think once again about the sickening, cyclical, never-ending, villain-protagonist discourse, where it's oh, well, Walter White was the perspective character, so, therefore, when he kills people, we have to understand it as the incorrect thing for a protagonist to do. It's so, sickening and weird that people cannot consume something without trying to, flip the, gallant and goofus in just the right way so that they're identifying with the good person who is afraid of bad things, and that the bad people have karma visited upon them because, we can't have characters who are innocent be victimized. It's the death of storytelling to describe things in such a fucking terrible way. This is a shit show.
It's completely true, which leads us to The Telltale Heart, which was published by Edgar Allan Poe in 1843, told in first person by an unnamed narrator who is, in italics, definitely not mad, which is an in-joke because he, repeatedly, sort of talks directly to the assumed audience and, justifies himself as, completely sane, completely rational. Anyway, the narrator, likely a man, describes himself as being friendly with his elderly neighbor who has an odd-looking eye. The elderly man's eye bothers the narrator to the point that he, the narrator, murders his neighbor. The narrator then buries the body under the floorboards of the narrator's own apartment. He believes he's gotten away with it, even while talking to police in his apartment, until he hears the victim's heart beating beneath the floorboards. The narrator is convinced the police hear it too and breaks down, admitting to his crime. This wouldn't work for NoSleep because, in part, the narrator is obviously suffering from mental health issues and victimizes the elderly man by murdering him. Further, the narrator commits the murder simply because the elderly man's odd-looking eye, which breaks NoSleep's mental/physical health rule, and the narrator isn't afraid at any point.
All right.
Like,
So the previous rule, which we already kind of like razzed quite a bit, I think it's just blatantly ableist at this point, where it's like you have to exclude these elements entirely because like what, they would make people uncomfortable, or they would take away from the scary story that like people look or think a certain way. Like that's like, and on top of that, again, the whole bizarre moralism of like, we can't follow a scary person because what if we assume that we have scary elements to us or might do a bad thing? That doesn't allow us to just sort of experience spooky events from regular sane people who type on Reddit, and you know how good and sane they are because they explain the mechanics behind why they're able to use reddit.com and word process into it with their able bodies and sound minds. Fuck this.
yeah. No, it's insane because here's the thing. As someone who suffers and struggles with a bevy of psychological conditions, which I'm sure could be said for a lot of people who contribute to this channel and a lot of people watching this video right now. Hello. The thing is, the fear of, like, madness, I think is something that is felt substantially more by people who suffer from mental illness than by neurotypical people, you know? Because we see the edge. We're closer to the edge. And I think, I'll speak for myself here, I am often really afraid of falling off it. Not that I, think like, oh, I'll become the Joker and become a serial killer. No, like, I'm really genuinely just afraid sometimes during some of my episodes of just having a split from reality, where I become someone who goes so far from the pier, so to speak, you can't drag them back in. That they are plagued by horrors that exist only in their head and thus are unfightable. And the idea that we are told we can't engage with that fear, which is one of the most human fears out there, the spiral in the Magnus Archives, by the way, is just shutting off a huge portion of the human experience.
Yeah, because like I think of something like the Telltale Heart, and obviously you have your struggles with it. I too have like struggles, like I have, and I know this is like memeified to death, but like I sometimes have like certain intrusive thoughts, and it's just this idea like in your head of just like, well, what if you just did something that made absolutely no sense for no logical reason that you could never walk back from? And like when I engage with fiction like the Telltale Heart, there is this feeling that it's not just engaging with like the vague concept of mental illness or madness. There is also this feeling of like engaging with guilt, with anxiety, with like, malice, with these like strange urges that we have that like plague us. And to not have an outlet, to not know that there is an abstracted form of that existing in fiction that can be used as a common experience so that we're not, constantly living in this like there's no way to cure these feelings. I think that it especially in horror, I think to close that door is to turn away from humanity itself in a really like malicious and stupid and negligent way.
No, it's true. It's true because all of the many anxieties that the works of Edgar Allan Poe engage with, and the Telltale Heart in particular, is the fact that, like, you never, and obviously this is using kind of outdated language, but, like, you never know that you're going mad, That's what's so scary about it. To be a little bit more specific, I have suffered for basically my whole life with severe health anxiety as a like extension of my OCD. And There was this period, maybe like 5 years ago now, where I was completely on the brink. Like, Gus probably remembers this time. Like, the delusions of having every disease under the sun, from cancer to HIV to like everything, just completely consumed me. And at the time, as I was rapidly like speeding further into that world of like paranoia and unreality, um, everyone else seemed crazy to me for not noticing the things I was noticing. And that's what's so scary about it. The fact that a lot of the time, when the call is coming from inside the house, you won't think I'm going crazy. You'll think, much like the narrator of the Telltale Heart, even if obviously, like, most people aren't, you're never, like, violent or a danger to anyone but yourself. You will think the world is going mad and you're the last sane person. And that's a very frightening and isolating position to be in, and it gives you a sense of loneliness and alienation that is only going to exacerbate all the other ways you're struggling.
Yeah, and like we were saying earlier, it connects to that whole idea of, like, people needing community and needing connections. And if you're already prone to feeling this way and you don't have those connections, it just compounds things and makes it worse. And the idea that outlets like this could exist but are being prevented by existing because discussing any and all of this and trying to engage with this would be including elements that are distasteful, or to, like, in a more, like, I think horrifically unempathetic way, saying that it's all navel gazing. What could be more contemptuous and inhuman than doing that?
Like, I just poured out my heart with a very, like, personal experience that has given me, frankly, some of the worst and most scary times in my entire life. And if you are gonna turn around and tell me that I can't process those feelings through the medium of horror unless I'm writing it as a big monster that jumps out at me at Starbucks, then I don't want anything to do with you. And I don't want any part of your platform. And the thing is, man, and I've been saving this kind of this little sort of Columbo moment for the end here. That this is not just us being like old man yells at cloud about this. There is a little piece of data that I want to share with you that is absolutely brutal, in my opinion. The NoSleep subreddit has 18 million members. Its top post of all time has 73,000 upvotes from 5 years ago. If I sort it to top of this year, right? That is only a 4-year difference. The top of this year was from 6 months ago. 7,600 upvotes. 7,600 upvotes is not only literally basically a tenth of what the heights were for 5 years ago. Consider for a second what a tiny drop 7,600 upvotes is in a subreddit with 18 million members. This is a dead subreddit, and it's dead because the rules scared off the authors and created formulaic stories that the audience gets bored with.
Yeah, and Henry, I think with all of that in perspective, because, we've gotten deep, we've gotten personal, we've talked about our upbringing as writers and the way that it contrasts with, the current state of things, whatever they may be. But I think overall, if I wanted to take what we've learned here and turn it into a universal point about writing advice, it would be that this is the dark and tropic future at the bottom of a spiral that is made up of boxing yourself in with rules. Because I gotta tell you, man, and I'm sure you're with me on this one, it would be better for new writers and for old writers and for any writers to be writing with absolutely zero rules as opposed to these rules, or any set of rules that limit creativity as much as to make it samey and detached from human reality and from the importance of our own souls and experience.
I couldn't agree more, man. I couldn't agree more. And to be honest, we're going to kind of wrap things up here because most of the advice from just other writers talking to each other on the forums is, boilerplate stuff that we've gone over like dozens of times on this show.
Honestly, I'm sure that a lot of the stuff on the forums is just people being like kind of normal despite these rules, Like, I think it would be people just kind of acting neutral and kind of trying to go about their day and figuring things out while this like monument to bizarre, limiting, myopic human experience exists above them, hovering over at all times, making sure that they're staying in line.
Just trying to cope with the inshitification. So yeah, this has been our Halloween special. We were honestly on the precipice of not doing this show anymore. But when we made the last one, like, seeing how many people in the comments were talking about how the Two Professional Writers show has helped them over the years, we honestly realized that, like, at the end of the day, even if there's people that are just gonna like watch it and never write, and even if they make up the majority of the audience, if it helps a few people write, it's frankly worth the time it takes to research, record, and edit these. Because one thing will always be true, and it will be that me and Gus will always be ready to sit in front of a mic and scream about writing for a couple of hours. And even more so when it's about things that are personal to us.
Exactly. And that's the thing. It's like, at the end of the day, we're really passionate about this stuff, and we haven't ever stopped doing it and working at our own stuff, and also just bouncing from like different writing job to writing job. It's scary, it's chaotic, and we've had our own ups and downs.
It's a mercenary world.
But what we have decided not to do is take the idea that because it's difficult for us, we shouldn't even try to help other people who are just starting out. Because we've made it a certain way, and, we've got ours, and we've found our niche, and we've realized it's a lot more subjective, and that we didn't know certain things as well as we thought we did, yada, yada, yada. We could descend into this, like, we're all on our own journey sort of stuff, but the truth is, we have to give out as much advice as we can, and we have to mean it. Because not all of it's going to resonate with everybody. There are going to be people who like doubt our skills, doubt our credentials. There are going to be like people who will doubt themselves so much that, any advice sounds scary to them. But at the end of the day, if we're not there for something, if we're not trying to help this community that we've built realize a little bit more of their creative endeavors, we're depriving the world of something that the two of us have, which is a desire for more people to just express themselves.
So write the thing you want to write. Check out Killjown XXX. Check out the Kingmaker histories. Subscribe to the channel. And statement ends.